Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clocked In with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in.
Hey, what's going up, guys? We got a special guest today. We have Keith Keppner. He's the founder of Keppner Boxing, which actually is franchising, which is pretty cool. And he has an incredible story of overcoming adversity and creating strong values. And we're going to dive into all that today. Keith, how are you doing?
Doing great, Jordan. Thank you for having me on, man.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on the Clocked In podcast. So, Keith, I know you faced so much adversity. You've done so much in your time. Where does your story start?
Say that one more time.
Where does your story start? Where did it all begin?
Yeah.
Where did it all get started?
Yeah, man. So born in Georgia, North Georgia. My family's originally from Chicago, so I kept the Chicago sound. Born in a college town, Athens, Georgia, and grew up on 40 acres and spent a lot of time outside playing and everything else. And that was my upbringing and my childhood, pretty tranquil and beautiful. And I was really into art and things like that. But the whole time I had boxing in the background, and that, little to what my dad ever thought would happen, that ended up becoming the main thing in my life, at least over the past 15 plus years. And he would always tell people at the school that I went to, there was kind of a hippie school, that they're like, "Oh, he's such a great artist." And he's like, "Yeah, he's going to be welterweight champion of the world." And he thought he was going to make his prediction come true, because I was steering that way. But then in 2010, I got a neck injury and started coaching. And all the while, all I have is I worked at a Subway restaurant, and I'm a high school dropout basically because I had chronic Lyme disease for many years undiagnosed. And thank God for my mother. She finally got me a blood test that came up positive. So started treatment, and treatment can be a long road. That's actually a controversial topic on if there's chronic Lyme or if it turns into like an autoimmune issue.
Yeah. Wow. So let's back it up a little bit. So how did your dad play a role in kind of your upbringing? Because that's not too... The reason I say it is because, like, most of the time when we grow up, our parents are like, be whatever you want to be. Not he's going to be welterweight champion of the world. Like, that's it. And that's not the trajectory you were going on. I mean, you eventually got there, but how was that for you?
Yeah, it didn't bother me. I was a pretty easygoing kid. And fortunately, that translated to, a fairly easygoing adult, but I was driven as a kid. So, yeah, was him being a PhD in neuroscience, clinical psychologist, and nationally renowned for treating anorexia and things of that nature. He knew the power of suggestion. He was actually also a hypnotist, stage hypnotist and whatnot. And so, yeah, so him saying that, he would just say it like in a passive way, just like, "Oh, whatever, not like I'm going to force you." And he told my sister and I, like many good parents, that, "Hey, you're going to do some type of physical activity." And I didn't want to do any of the physical activity whatsoever. Neither did my sister, because our focus, again, were more of the arts, which is more of my mom. And so he said, "Well, okay, if you don't pick a sport, then I'll pick one for you." And he's like, "I'm going to pick one that's worthwhile," because he's a very purist type guy. So he got me into doing a little kickboxing when I was a kid, a little taekwondo, things like that. I sparred a couple of times in boxing when I was a kid and beat the heck out of one of our family friends and kids, rather, not one of our family friends. And but then it wasn't a thing. But boxing always kind of had this interesting allure, maybe with his suggestion, but also just seeing how passionate he was about it, how much he enjoyed it. He truly had just such a deep love for boxing history, and he really fleshed out that beauty to me, I think, in a very non-forceful way, that then when I was interested in taking that step into becoming a man and become the opposite of sickly and weak, 125 pounds and carpal tunnel in both my wrists, sleeping 18 hours a day and felt worthless. I was ready to take that step into the field of diamonds in my own backyard, which was boxing.
Yeah, which is incredible. And so tell us about what happened. You're describing when you had the Lyme disease undiagnosed. What was the age and like how did that all happen? Because a lot of people, I feel like out of teenage years are very vulnerable, and
Yes.
that can affect everything. Like you hear
Right.
many people just being like, "Nope, I'm done. I'm not doing anything." Like because they had a little issue as a teenager. Like it's such an emotional period, and you had a big obstacle to overcome. So, like, what was that for you? What was that you
Yeah.
think was going on?
So to delve, yeah. So like taking that right there and running with that, that's something I don't talk about too much on podcasts, but I want to get into it is that so it first manifests itself as psychological, which it can do because it attacks your entire nervous system. So it can cause anxiety, depression, short-term memory loss, everything. It's like syphilis, except it's not an STD. So literally, when you hear about people going crazy from syphilis, you can get crazy from Lyme. It's a spirochete organism, so it's a very similar organism, or it's the same type of organism, just transmitted differently. Anyway, so here I am, starting to suffer, have symptoms that we didn't know what was wrong with me when I was in the 6th grade. And then it just kind of progressed and progressed and progressed. And I start to get this self-concept that, okay, well, I start to relate more with the alternative crowd, with the druggy crowd, with, the rocker crowd, the metalhead crowd. And, that's still great stuff. I really love the music and stuff, but that's who I thought my identity was. Then I started literally hanging out with travelers, like traveler types in Athens and homeless people. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, because I thought that's kind of what my lot in life was. That's what I identified with the most, I guess. Because as you know, a lot of people that are homeless or have those type of lifestyles, they're not mentally well, and that's largely what their challenge is. Or there's drug issues oftentimes combined. So I spent kind of my ages 13 through maybe 15, a few of those years, man, just like living downtown Athens around a bunch of people that would buy me a fifth of alcohol and a fifth of vodka and give me cigarettes and everything else. I was smoking about a pack a day and just, I thought I was going to probably be dead by the time I was 30. And I also, in my own way, I thought it was part of the journey of being an artist, because I got into playing guitar and everything else and did that for many years. And I thought I was going to be like, a Kurt Cobain type character. That was, I think, my ideal and my idols, unfortunately, at that time.
Wow. And was that difficult for you, or you didn't? Because at 13, I feel like everyone's hanging out with their friends and just doing normal things. But were you going to school, or did you skip school at that point? Or
yeah, well, I was skipping school a lot by the time I was a freshman in high school. I went to the equivalent of one semester over 2 years of my first 2 years of high school and then dropped out. But yeah, I related a lot more to these people that were down and out and done for in a lot of ways than my peer group. And, it was because I was sick. And so but I had this whole self-concept that that's who I was. And then there were glimmering moments, I think also because of being raised by great parents and also seeing my father, the way that he conducted himself, how hard he worked at being the best he could be in his field of being a psychologist, but also as a coach, that I felt like there's something more for me. And there's always that little bit of me that still hadn't died yet, right? That was me before the illness, which was ambitious and everything else. I wanted to make movies. I did clay animation, all this stuff like that. And so, then when finally, though, because after, trying to get it together, trying to drink a bunch of energy drinks to be productive, to become a better guitar player and things like that. Anything I do it 100%. I would always come up against this wall. And eventually, Jordan, it's like you go up against enough walls and you don't know why the wall is there. You think, well, the wall is me. And it's because I don't want to succeed, or I'm just lazy, or whatever it is, right? And
of course,
and eventually you start to embrace that. And so thank God I finally, because of my mom, I remember when my mom called me up and told me the results that we got in the mail of positive for Lyme disease. And I remember I was with my friend. We were smoking weed and recording music. And I was so happy to have an answer that wasn't me, right? Being deficient. And it was actually something that I had always been, I felt, somewhere deep inside me, like, the body kind of knows sometimes. And I knew something was wrong. or I hoped something was wrong, and it was right. And then therefore becomes the next journey and challenge, which is that now you've identified what's the challenge, what's the problem, what needs to change, and it's up to you to change. And so many times that you kind of alluded to, we will address our challenges, we will understand them, and know what we need to fight, but we won't do shit about it. And it takes us too long to do something about it. And so I vowed that I was not going to make my parents spend literally thousands of dollars a month on treatment. Thank goodness we had the means to do that. And still be smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, still be smoking weed, still be drinking all the time, and be 35 years old like I am now, and still be sick. At the time, we were looking at maybe filing disability. I was practically disabled at the time. I tried to work for about 6 months at Subway and had to quit because of fatigue and everything else. And so, yeah, that I made damn sure that was not going to be me. And so the opportunity to do that, it's like another guy who was way more successful than me as a fighter, Forrest Griffin. He's a UFC fighter out of Athens, Georgia. He trained in our backyard a few times, and from the area. He said that the threat of getting into a fight, right, like as a competitive combat athlete, is good motivation to be in shape, right? So if it's something that you're going to do, you're going to sign up to do a fight or something like that, or even spar, it's a good motivation not to smoke cigarettes. It's a good motivation to go to bed early. It's a good motivation to take care of yourself. It's a good motivation to train hard. So it's almost kind of giving you the largest motivation you'd have besides death, which is physical pain of getting beat up.
That's absolutely incredible. And I really appreciate you sharing all that. And the amazing thing is all I could think about was identity and how you shifted your identity when you were at such a low point, because most of the time we don't see that. Like, you were like a phoenix who literally rose from the ashes,
right.
A new person, right? You come in as this artist, this person that you think you're going to be an artist, and then you come out and now you're interested in boxing to eliminate the habits, because it's different. And it's crazy that it's just the identity. And how many of us and the audience, how many of us listening are acting a certain way because of our identity? Our identity says successful people go out and drink and party and pop bottles. And it's like, no, maybe the successful person's in bed at 9 p.m.
Right.
Maybe. Well, because you're going to feel better for sure.
That's right. And to that point is that part of my journey of crawling out of that, of the identity of a loser, a druggie, a person that was going to be a street urchin type. I had dreads for a little while, believe it or not. So that's why I'm bald now. It's because I lost a little bit. Yeah. So the thing is with that is that what was one of the triggers, and actually became a trigger for me later too, a mental trigger, was just reversing the tape back and reversing back to me before the 6th grade, before I started having challenges, and me remembering who I was. And I think that's something that's very maybe useful for anyone that might be struggling in a similar situation or going through a tough time, is we all have moments. It might just be moments that you can go back to and remember and be like, that's who I am. And that's a proof. That's proof of who I can be or who I am in certain moments, and to grow that or to restore that. And so I literally would just like reverse back and start reminding myself literally as a freaking elementary school kid, and how motivated I was, how driven I was. I would like just do stuff for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours because I wasn't sick as hell. And I used the same trigger actually in my late 20s, early 30s when I got into running, because I told my wife at the time I'd never run more than a couple miles. And then I'd done a couple half marathons and many races and things like that, and set a lot of PRs. And one of the triggers that I would use for myself in the last little bit of a race is I remember. That for me is remembering the struggles, the pain, the suffering of being sick, and not forgetting that, because we're all going to die. And I think we don't live our best life when we forget that this is momentary, it's transitory, and we're all going to die. And so you need to make the most of it.
I love that. I think that's so powerful that you used the good portion, which was your elementary school, but you also used the lower portion as well.
That's right.
Yeah, the pain. And the thing is that we don't reflect back enough. We're always looking towards the future. What's next? What's this? What's that? And I do think it's super important to look back and realize, like, damn, I overcame a lot, or damn, it was hard, or I'm powerful, or and if you're here today, if you're listening, you're powerful,
Right.
because life is hard. There's a lot of shit that goes on. There's so many negative stuff in the world, and if you're here listening to positive stuff like this, like, it's definitely going to inspire people. So I think anyone listening is inspiring. But back to you, Keith, like, this is incredible what you've overcome and what you did. And so take us through what was going on as you're realizing you have the Lyme disease. What does that even entail to overcome that? What is the requirements? And then how'd you get into boxing?
Right. Well, this is actually where just a touch of controversial comes into play. It's become more accepted, thank goodness. But so my treating physician, Dr. Jomsek, he actually started with HIV in the 80s and then got into Lyme in the 90s. And so anyway, the benefit for me, he was one of the best practicing physicians in the nation, and he was in South Carolina, and so very close to North Georgia. So we started treatment there. And then because of different things with insurance law and requirements and things like that, he had to leave South Carolina. He had to go up to, I think, North Carolina. And then eventually now he's up in DC. And so it ended up, at least the last little bit of my treatment, us literally having to go up to DC, Washington, DC to, to have a checkup and whatnot. And then with antibiotic treatment, there's something called the Herxheimer response, which is that you get an exacerbation of symptoms when you start die off and you start killing off this organism. Because with Lyme disease, what makes it so dangerous and problematic is that it's a spirochete again. So imagine a screw-like organism, bacteria, that screws in or drills into your cell walls, hides out in healthy cells. And also it can encapsulate itself in a cyst form. And if I remember correctly, this might be out-of-date information, maybe it's different, but it can lie dormant for, I think, up to at least a year, maybe a couple of years. So you can get bit by a tick, not get a bullseye rash, which I never got a bullseye rash, and not have any symptoms until, let's say, 6 months later, a year later. And then your symptoms might be something like I first experienced, which was anxiety and depression, nauseousness, things like that. And think, oh man, it's psychosomatic, or think it's something that needs to be treated with antidepressants. And during my treatment before we identified what it was, one of the antidepressants I took, out of the best meaning type of treatment, actually made me go psychotic. So I literally had hallucinations and everything else because we're treating something that wasn't the problem, right? And then I also had neurotoxins released from Lyme disease in my brain and everything else. So treatment started. Now, in hindsight, doing competitive boxing training and treating a possible chronic illness that affects your immune system is a really dumb idea. You never want to do that because the immune system is what heals your brain from, trauma. And so the subconcussive injuries that you get from heavy sparring in boxing and things like that, you need a healthy immune system to recover. And so we would do things the right way as far as having enough time between hard sparring sessions to recover. But it wasn't a smart thing, looking back at it. But that was all part of the journey. And my joints were shot from Lyme disease. And so there were some times where when I was boxing in the United States, and I also did boxing in Mexico, where I wasn't able to throw a punch for a month. And I just would work defense, footwork, things like that, and also started visualizing too. And that's where I actually identified, I use this story for a lot of my fighters to help them understand the importance of visualization. And any, obviously, sports psychologist or anyone knows the importance of that. But so my dad would always tell me, oh, you're a little bit tight. And you want to be really loose as a fighter to be an effective fighter. And it wasn't until both my shoulders were, really jacked up and I couldn't spar or anything else like that, that I was like, okay, well, how can I get better? My dad's like, okay, well, you can visualize, right? So stay in shape and visualize. So every night I would turn on the clock, a timer, round timer, sit there, close my eyes and visualize sparring and fighting people and literally playing out, my best type of fight and dealing with getting hit with certain shots and then responding to those certain shots and overcoming that. Getting hit, coming right back, little things that I struggled with. But it was amazing though, when I really was getting good at visualization, it was when I was able to identify the tension, because the moment I would close my eyes, focus for a moment and then turn on that clock. And once I heard the ding, 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 and I see that person across from me and the round starts, I felt my shoulders just shrug up a little tiny bit. And that's where I was able to identify that tension. So then therefore, when I was able to actually go back to boxing, one is I stopped injuring my shoulders, because if you have that tension, it's part of what causes the injury sometimes. But number two is I was fast as hell. I hit harder. I wasted less energy to hit hard, and was able to just come back off of no sparring, months of no sparring, and when I should be rusty, and come back and be sparring and actually looking better than when I left.
Yeah, and I would, two things. So I think the first thing is that you boxing might have given you the confidence to overcome the Lyme disease and actually look for something promising, because it's tough.
Right.
Like an object in motion stays in motion. If you're not
Right.
in motion, like you're sitting there, it's kind of tough. The second thing with the visualization, I want to say there was a study done regarding basketball.
Right.
You've heard about this one, right?
Yep. Free throws. Yep.
Yes. I was going to say, I want to say it was like they broke up the group. Half the group didn't take any free throw shots, just visualized. The other half did take regular shots. The visualized group actually did better.
Yep. By about 1%. Yep.
Yes. And they were training. And so the reason I say this is because a lot of people relate visualization to sports, which is good. That's one avenue. There's also the avenue of visualizing your life.
Right.
And I do this sometimes, where you close your eyes, you take yourself to a moment, and I'm telling you, it's hard. It's very difficult, because it's hard to imagine yourself standing on stage, speaking to 10,000 people, impacting a ton of lives when you don't know what that's like.
Right.
So you have to imagine what that's like, and you have to bring yourself to that place and be the presence. And is someone calling your name? Are people speaking to you? How do you stay focused? How do you put it all together? So, right. And it takes time, but these are the questions you ask yourself, so that when you go there and you have that experience, it's like it's been there before. Right. And this happens all the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, so true. So true. And yeah, I mean, that's how you prepare, because what is imagined vividly in the mind is, experienced by the body the same way as the actual experience. So that is the only way to prepare for something you've never done before. Exactly. And then also too, it's like a quote that I love that I'm sure you've heard, and perhaps everyone listening has heard, but what is luck, right? It's when preparedness meets opportunity. So I was doing my best to be prepared, but there's still that luck factor, and but you can't control that. So don't worry about it. But I got my neck injury that interfered with my spinal cord 2010, July 4th. And so it made it so I don't need to get hit anymore, because I could risk getting paralyzed. And so that actually really, though, Jordan, got me off of the personal development train for a little bit, because I had to get on the personal development train to get myself, as someone that was never an athlete, someone with a chronic illness, to even get to the level of competency with boxing, to the point where I could actually even spar with like a national champion and things like that. So it kind of left a bad flavor in my mouth, because I became such a true believer that, I was going to succeed at this, and I burned all my boats, and I was like, do or die, going to make this happen. I did, I was 22, 23 years old or whatever, 23. And so I had the kind of, you ever see $1 Million Baby? You ever see that movie?
No.
Okay. So it's a movie about a woman fighter, and it, directed by Clint Eastwood. Great movie.
Okay.
The end is really horrible and sad, but I was prepared for that type of situation at the end, because I had sunk all my ships, man. I didn't have a girlfriend, no dating life, nothing. And, I had honestly a really bad view of women, and because I was just keeping away from everything and just locked on my one thing. And obviously I missed out on a lot of things because of that, and a lot of growth, but I was hyper-focused.
Which it can be good at the same time.
Right.
The crazy thing is, as we're going to progress through your journey, to opening the boxing gyms, to coaching, to everything, as I'm seeing it, I realize that it seems like your hardest client was yourself.
Right.
Like, to coach, because you had to coach yourself. Yeah, from a very difficult place. Because the way you describe it, you're like chronic illness, this, that, nothing, no athletic ability, like just trying to get that. Like, you had to coach yourself, and like even those times without your shoulder, your visualization. So all I would say is, like, whenever you're putting a lot of effort towards something, you might not know what that outcome might be. You might have an outcome that you deem that you're like, this is the outcome, but there might be another outcome in mind that might be a whole lot better. and a
That's
whole
right.
lot more scalable.
That's right. You are stacking skills, and you just got to decide where you're stacking them, right? Or use the stack. So that's one thing that's cool about the business aspect is that, like you and I were talking earlier about video editing and things like that. I spent a lot of my youth, like I said, doing clay animation, doing, movie stuff. And so I've told my wife plenty of times, like, man, here I am doing some video editing here and there just because I enjoy it, but it also has a purpose as far as business or marketing or what have you. And it's just another skill just to stack on top of it.
And most people don't realize that like little things that you've done before in your life, because it's been interesting. The last few conversations I've had with people was, how do you know if you have a passion? How do you find that passion? What is that passion? And the answer that I keep getting is where the energy flows. What gives you energy? What is that? And so it's interesting to me because as I see you talk about boxing, I see you like I see the energy coming through with it. But there's also that creative component. So that's the energy as well. So it's what in you as the listener has that energy? You know what I mean? It might be two polar different things, two totally opposite things that you never would have thought. But like that's what makes the human experience unique. That's what makes it cool.
Well, and also real quick, Jordan, too, is that where I was extremely lucky, outside of obviously being alive, which is extremely lucky for anyone that's alive, but is that I was limited on my options, right? So, if you're a typical person in America, in 2023, man, you got like all the damn options in the world. And if you're in your early 20s, man, you're just bombarded by options, right? Options that other people are telling you to do, options that you're seeing that seem appealing, right? And it's just death by 1,000 options, man. And so so that's where I was so damn fortunate because I wasn't like not close to my father, but I wasn't like that close to my father. I was more close to my mother until I started boxing. But why did I start boxing? It was like the only goddamn option I had, man, because it was like I'm a high school dropout, so I'm not really going to pursue that. My dad was like, "Here, you want to like be a mechanic or learn a trade?" I'm like, "No, that sucks. I don't really want to do that, even though it's a great thing to do." But it was like, no, I have no interest at all because, like you said, it doesn't have the creative component to it. So boxing for me, like the way I described it to people when I first started getting into it, it's like improv ballet. So it has that improvisational aspect, which I started to get a lot of appreciation for jazz before I stopped playing music and got into boxing. And then it's that physical aspect of it's coordinated dance in a sense. But yeah, so I was fortunate though, because I had almost no option. And the same thing when I stopped boxing. Here I am, 23 years of age. I have no skills really. Not really. I really just don't have any skills. And I'm a horrible employee, especially at that time. I've learned how to be a better employee now probably. But yeah, man. So it's like, well, what am I going to do? And so that's where my dad was like, well, you spent all this time studying boxing, everything from the history to everything. And I literally was mentoring with my father the whole time, where he was my best friend. He and I were best friends. And, it was the greatest times of his life, he told me afterwards. And he was my mentor, as being a man and also as a coach. And so I got to the point working with him during that time, being trained by him, largely just solely trained by him, that I could coach exactly how this guy that's 65 years old at the time coaches, who's been doing boxing since he was 16. So, but I had no other option. But I was a benefit from that because I utilized the one option I had versus if I had too many goddamn options, who knows what I would do? Maybe I'd still be floundering around, right? Kind of pursuing and chasing after, things or maybe, the beautiful analogy about what is it? The sirens, right? I was fortunately forced and strapped to the mast myself through happenstance that I was able to avoid the siren call on the rocky shore.
I absolutely love that because in reality, it's incredible because you're right. At this day and age, there's so many options, and people go around and they jump around and they do so many different things and don't know where really spend their time because they're like, "What are you passionate about?" "I don't know. I'm passionate about this." "I don't know. I don't know. Try this out. Try this out." And it's like, "Let me do this course. Let me hang out with this guy. Let me do this thing." But for you to put your head down and really jump in, it's incredible. It's awesome. And it's a level of mastery that very few get to after a certain while. That's why you're able to coach. And then also learning from your dad, who I did light math, it sounded like he was 50 years, 49 years at that time of just coaching and boxing. Like, that's absurd. So of
Right.
course he's going to transfer the knowledge over, and you're going to be a level of expertise that you had no idea that you thought you were working towards. But
Right.
it's just a pivot point. It's just a pivot point, and everyone's got one in their life, and it's just when's it going to come? So you pivot to what? Coaching, or was it opening the gym, or what happened?
Oh no, so coaching. So again, being the artist type, so not appreciating the mindset of business and everything else that goes into that. I say business just because that's a good overarching word for it. But it's so, like it's so nuanced, it has so many aspects. But yeah, so my dad was a classic engineer type, right? So he thought, he initially he wanted to be an experimental researcher, but he just knew he couldn't support a family off that. It'd be so hard. So that's where his heart laid. And that's a lot of where my heart is as well, is kind of like all this learning and, all this type of stuff. Anyway, conceptual ideas. So, but there's a practical side. And so anyway, the coaching aspect is I approach it as a pure practitioner. So it's like, I'm just going to be the best and absolute best coach I can be. And this is actually where my father, had a misjudgment, right? Because of him being older and everything else. And it was beneficial for me to obviously progress on. But he told me, yeah, Keith, when you're my age, you're going to get about 15% better as a coach, maybe, 10% better. And it's like talking to my wife, who met me probably about a couple of years in the coaching. It's like, honestly, because she's very honest with me. It's like, honestly, how much better of a coach do you think I am? She's like, well, it's like multiple times better, right? Because I've, obviously gone from replicating to now, adding and now growing and continuing the evolutionary process. But anyway, so right to coaching from it. What my dad did was actually basically trick me into coaching, because when he first proposed the idea to me, I used to be a very negative person. And so he said, hey, why don't you try to coach? And like a few weeks after me having to stop boxing. And I'm like, dude, that's like being like, hey, do you want to watch your like ex-wife make love to somebody? Because it's like, this is this thing that replaced all sexual desire, all, any desire.
Everything.
Yeah, it was my everything. So here I am going to go to the same gym where the dude that helped show me I had this neck injury is there. He's a great guy. He coaches now, and I'm friends with him on Facebook. But like, dude, like I don't want to be around that, So anyway, I came back up to the States. We're in Mexico at the time. I personally came back up to the States, and he came up for a little while as well. He started helping out some guys in this little podunk gym in just the middle of the country, some MMA fighters and things like that. And so he's doing this kind of boxing thing with them like once a week. And then one week, I don't know if he planned this or not, because he's pretty sly in a lot of ways. But he, he's like, hey, Keith, I got this other thing going I got to take care of. Do you mind just jumping in there and coaching for me one night? I'm like, gosh, geez. So anyway, he convinces me to go do it. I go do it. And, of course, I'm nervous and everything else, as anyone that is that first starts doing anything like coaching, no matter how much experience you have around something. And the guys really enjoyed working with me. I enjoyed it as well. I was like, oh, Keith, well, how about you do it again next week? And so then I just built up this thing where I just started coaching. And that was where I was able, he helped me pull and come out of the dumps of feeling like my life was over, helped me realize that there was a whole nother life I had. And so I'm indebted to him forever for that. And so then started coaching, started having some success with fighters, more success than I had as a fighter, right? Pretty quickly. And within literally 3 years, I produced somebody that was a state Gold Glove champion. And, after 3 months of training them, and they'd have no boxing experience. And I partnered with somebody. That partnership didn't work because I didn't enter into the partnership again with any idea of business or anything that entails. And so I ended up starting my own thing. And at this time I had met who would be my future wife and business partner, Lissa, and she had managed a gym, or was managing a gym at that time, near Atlanta, Georgia. At that time, it was about like maybe 7 years of managing it, or 6 years. And so she told me, no, Keith, don't start your own business. And so she's real risk averse. And largely she was right in a lot of ways. Like I didn't have the skills to start a business that would actually succeed. And because I came at it fully from this idea of where a lot of boxing coaches come from it. And that is that you need a day job to support your boxing gym, or you need to be independently wealthy. Right. And so a lot of these guys that start boxing gyms, maybe they've earned their money somewhere else, or they get, an investor or whatever, and then they go to train on pro fighters and things like that. My goal at that time was strictly just to produce a world champion. And then I realized, okay, well, I need to get general public in here to kind of support that, and da. So, so against her advice, I went out on my own, and, But what little did she know, though, is like my whole goal with that too was I'm gonna make a life for you and I, and we weren't even dating at the time, but it was like I'm gonna, frankly, use your skills that you have and your experience and your knowledge to help me succeed with this business and get you out of your situation at your gym, which is good. Like there's a lot of great people, and her boss and everyone else helped her out a bunch, but it was just kind of this like, she had her own things that were going on with that. There were hangups and troubles and drama that she needed to frankly just get away from. And so, yeah. And so after about a year into it, so after about 2013, I was just basically, she ended up moving to Athens, and her and I, got together. And she told me, like, if we're going to get together, the long story on that is that she broke up with me one time. Then I courted her for a year and a half, and then started, like I said, courting her. And then she's like, if we get back together, we're going to get married. I'm like, absolutely. So, so boom, she moved to Athens. We, started running the business together and started growing it, fairly quickly. But in that process, then we maxed out about her knowledge. And so then we both had to start growing, right? And largely that fell on me to really start growing and learn how to market, learn how to sell. And then after that, learning then how to scale. Because with her, people had told her at her old gym, like, hey, Lisa, you should start your own gym sometime. You ever going to start your own gym? She's like, hell no. She's like so against it. And it's true, by herself, probably not a good idea, right?
But I think you bring up a major point of bringing in the right people.
Right.
And bringing the team together, because that helps a ton. And then also, if you go in something knowing, hey, I might not know everything, but I can figure it out.
Yeah.
That's great. That's dude, because there's no way you sit at home. And it's funny because I'm knocking the visualization. There's a visualization of it working, and then there's a visualization of like, hey, we got a customer complaint. How are we going to handle that? You just handle that in the moment. You just handle that one and you figure it out. Like you tell them you're sorry and you just do what you can to make it right. But there's so many things that you couldn't even go through every situation, but you're going through the school of hard knocks, quote unquote.
Right.
And that's what's making it really happen.
Right.
So how is that? Yeah.
Well, and to your point on that, so two is one is, who Jordan Belfort is, right?
Yeah.
So he has a really cute thing. He's like talking about the visualization thing. And, again, there's a lot of value to it. I preach it to our fighters and things like that. And also it's good for, people with many endeavors. But, he's like, like the secret type thing. It's like, oh, you're sitting there, you light your candle, and you visualize, the check is in the mail. The check is in your mail. And little do you know, all it's in the mail is an eviction notice. And your wife is sleeping with a neighbor and all that stuff, because you actually got to take action, right? And that's where trying to prepare. And this is where the creative side comes in. I've heard a lot of things about personality traits with entrepreneurial type people. And I would say I happen to fall into a lot of those because, and actually not into the management side, which is actually the place that I struggle the most. But that's the creative, the risk taker. And, you kind of enjoy sloppiness because you know that out of sloppiness is actually like kind of the definition of creativity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the best part is, and most people don't realize this, but whenever anything starts, it's always going to be the worst,
right?
Which is the best. And if something's the worst, it's the best. Because if you're seeing this on YouTube, you can see my background, the lighting, it all looks good. The first 50 episodes, it was anywhere I could find. I got lamps. It looks ridiculous, but things take time to refine them and look nice. And like, it just takes time. But that's the best part about being creative is that you can create whatever you want. You can put it together in whatever way you want, which is the fun part.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely the fun part. So when you guys started getting into the businesses, how'd they do?
What's that?
How'd the businesses do? How'd the boxing gym end up going?
Yeah. Well, so, so Intelligent Part was opening up out of actually, it was not intelligent. It was just out of resources, so opened up super, super small. Right. And like 1,100 square feet, which is super tiny for a boxing gym, especially one that has a ring in it. And so we maxed that out. And then we moved into a larger location that was about double the size. So about 2,400 square feet and in a, better part of town. And that's where I realized, because we also got married at that time, and it's like, wow, like I got to take this serious, At this time, I'm 26 or something like that, and I'm just like, dude, like now is the time. Like if I'm gonna actually, because we have this like rent now, it's over double what it was, and more expenses, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, and so that's where I had again, Providence came in a sense, but also too, it's like I've had these individuals that have come in my life, like it's my father, obviously, but these other folks that play as mentors. And part of it is luck, but again, it goes to that preparedness thing, meaning that from maybe boxing, I learned how to be coachable and also know the value of coaching. And also when you coach people, it actually makes you more coachable, right? If you actually become a good coach. Now, granted, there are coaches out there total a-holes that are not very coachable, but when you truly, in my opinion, become a better coach, you're pretty damn coachable. It's like if Jordan, you were going to coach me on something, man, like, I pride myself on, like take the direction, understand, don't over question until I understand it. And then, maybe execute, and then maybe come back and be like, hey, like, well, could I change this maybe? Right. So this one gentleman came into my life, cold called me. He had a marketing company in California. And, you get phone calls like this all the time. And at this time we had tried Groupon, and, that had only done so much. People that do Groupons, obviously Groupon died as a company, but or largely died. It's practically dead. But people that do Grouponing, they're loyal to Groupon, right? And it is very hard to convert those people. And so that was one form of marketing. We tried some Facebook ads, not a lot of success because we didn't know how to do it, right? And so it's one of those things that you start developing these stories as a business owner. Oh, well, Facebook ads don't work, right? Or, this thing, that doesn't work. And it's like, well, dude, no, you just don't do it right. Right? So why don't you go ask someone that knows how to do it? Then only after you've exhausted that, you determine if it works or not. Or like how Brian Tracy said it, and it changed my life reading some of his books, like No Excuses, is that when you learn something new, try it 9 times. And once you've tried it 9 times, then you can make a determination if it works or not. Right. So if you learn a new sales, close or whatever it is, marketing strategy, like give it 9 times. And then after that, then you can decide. Right. So anyway, this guy, Vernon, calls me up. And he makes me an offer I can't refuse. Because at this time, too, I'm like the typical small business owner where I don't want to spend any money on marketing. Same with my wife. She does not want to spend any money on marketing. And so, yeah, he says, hey, look, I will put up the ad budget and you make the sales, Keith, and I will split the revenue with you. You just got to sell them through my portal so that I get the money first. And then we'll split it 50-50. And, I'll cover my ad costs and make something off of it for just generating the leads. And so he became my first actual real business mentor outside of my wife. So my wife was very good on the structuring side and systemization side, and just simple things like member management, like those nuts and bolts stuff you need to just be alive, right, to have it work. But as far as the actual growth side of the marketing, the sales, things like that, that's where this guy Vernon was a game changer. So then again, I'm coachable, so I started asking him a bunch of questions. And again, the thing about luck, kind of going back to that, is that now, why did this person become someone that truly helped me out a bunch and helped me have a paradigm shift? Well, because I was not a know-it-all with him. Maybe I said some stupid things like, "Oh, I don't think that works," but I was open to it, right? And I also showed that I was going to execute, right? And so I see that a lot of times as a coach, right? Whether I'm coaching someone as a business owner or coaching an athlete, is, man, like you can say too, Jordan. It's like when you work with somebody that receives the feedback, right? And they go home and they do their homework, right? And they put in that extra work that you asked them to do, and then they do a little bit more. And they take the direction and all that stuff, all the little intangibles and soft skills and just everything that goes into being a good coachable person. You're like, dude, I want to help you out. Like you just, as a coach, right? You just become so passionate about like just giving your all to that person. And so that's, I think, an advantage I've had is through being a good coach. I attract people to coach me.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. And the other part is that you weren't scared to go. You weren't going to go, so you give me the lead instead of you splitting it 50-50. I get 20, I get 75. You get, dude, because people get greedy all the time, right. And they're not like, there are so many deals that people do where they're just taking a loss just so that they can have that person in their life, because they're like, this person's going to help me in some way. I'd rather take less money and work with them.
Oh yeah.
And I'd rather get the smaller part of the pie, but at least learn what they're doing. Like, And people don't realize that because everyone's like, I gotta get a deal, I gotta get a thing. And it's like, no, sometimes you just need help. Like,
Oh yeah. Well,
sometimes you gotta need help.
and frankly too, I see that with team members, right? So someone that's, like fresh out of college or super, super young, man, when you start working for a company, no matter what size it is, but specifically if it's a mom and pop type business or, small startup type business, man, you have so much dang opportunity, man. So if you're too concerned about like, oh, like, am I going to get this little pay raise and that thing? It's like, dude, how about you go in there and freaking just crush it, man? And if you crush it, you'll actually help the business succeed. You'll have that much leverage in a smaller business as a team member to help it succeed that, dude, you'll become so damn invaluable that then at that point down the road, your negotiation power will be almost limitless versus like you're kind of talking about being like kind of trying to pinch the pennies. And yeah, man, you can only pinch a darn penny so much, man, before it just slides out your hand.
I mean, it's true. Like, it's funny because I was sitting here and I was like getting ready before this podcast, and I'm like, damn, like we're recording this podcast like kind of later in the night, and I'm like, wow, I've done that, but I've also recorded podcasts at like 7 a.m.
Right.
And I'm like, what if I thought to myself, I was like, what if I was just this? Hey, we can only do it during these hours. Think about how limiting that could be. Think about how limiting that would be. Instead of being like, oh, we need to adjust time. Great, what time? I'm good whenever you are. Like,
that's right.
Because that little bit puts you just eons ahead of people. Because when it's difficult, especially if the person you believe can help you in some sort of way, you make it as convenient as possible.
Right.
Oh, I have to drive 45 minutes. Great. We're only going to meet for 5. Great. Let's make it happen. Right. Because you might learn something that you never would have thought about knowing before. And you just have to get around these people.
Right. And playing off of that concept right there, Jordan, is that when you do it the way you do it, or you're talking about, you will more than likely be successful by some metric. You will experience progress, right? Which is what success is, right? The progressive realization of a worthy ideal, right? Now, if you do it the other way, right, which is you set these automatic brakes and limits on you, then you'll be left with only one thing. You'll be left with a story, right, of why it didn't work out that preserves only one thing, your ego, right? And it doesn't own up to the full truth, right? Sure, it might have been a bad economy. Sure, you might have lived in the wrong town. Sure, you might have, had something horrible happen to you. These are all truths, but it's not the full truth. So you have this story. It's like I remember our first full-time employee we hired, because again, I go from working at a Subway restaurant, being a sandwich artist, to trying to manage people and run a business. So our first full-time employee, great guy. We onboarded him horribly, and all the classic mistakes you can make, and being way too negative, right? That's another thing too, is that here we are talking about like really like strong specific points, but it's like, dude, you gotta, in my opinion, in my experience as a business owner and as a leader, have those soft skills to be able to give people positive feedback, let them know they're doing right. Not like I don't ever make those mistakes, but man, I've seen so many people, they're just like, oh, well, you did this wrong. Well, hey, you did that. We lost 2 clients because of that. And like, all you hear about is all the crap you screwed up. And you're like, okay, so what am I doing right? What can I do more of?
That, and I think, Keith, that's a huge point that people underestimate, because the thing is, like, the amount of times that I'll get an introduction, and if the intro goes really well, I'll text the person who introduced me and go, yo, they're fantastic. Like, thank you so much. Because people it's not just transactional. Like, you have to have it deeper than that. And you have to be like, yo, that was a really good relationship. I appreciate that. Or even if because what people don't realize is that affirmation of going, Keith, you were a really good listener today, people are going to listen more. like they want the compliment. It's like a dog getting a treat. And I make it that simple, but it's the truth. If you have a human and you want them to develop a good habit or a good value, you go, great job saying no to the bully, or or punching the bully in the face.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, you stood up for your friend, and that's a great value. Maybe we don't take it physically, but like, it's a good value that you stood up for your friend. Because there's so much like, I keep getting suspended. It's like, what happened? And I think it's that questioning of like really working through it and getting to that deep understanding of like, what actually happened here? instead of making that assumption. Because I know, Keith, you run a strong family dynamic from your parents to your own family that you were telling me about. And it's, how do you even develop some of those values? Because it's so quick that we can go, oh, you had a really long day. You had this, you had that. Now you can get upset at your dog. Like, you know what I mean? You can get upset because it's a trigger. Oh, daddy, how are you doing? You're too much energy right now. I don't need it. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, well, through constant practice. But again, it's one of those things that is the benefit of being focused. I believe the more as people we can be focused on being philosophers, which doesn't mean just reading, but being a practitioner of wisdom, or a lover of wisdom, rather, is what the actual word philosopher means, lover of wisdom. The easier all this will be, or rather not the easier it will be, but the better you will be, maybe perhaps when those situations come up. But that always that proper frame, it's like with our wonderful daughter that's 6 years old, is that she's not always going to be 6. And we're blessed for every moment that she's here with us. And it doesn't mean that stuff she does isn't annoying as hell. And, it gets on her nerves or whatnot, and or doesn't listen or throws a fit. But just to remind yourself of the full picture, right? So always just getting things back into frame. And, we lose touch with reality. And that's where, again, being raised very much with that appreciation for science, logical thinking, and things like that. I was raised in a very non-spiritual background or an experience growing up, but it was one rooted in strong ethics of being, steadfast, honest, and straight shooting. And so even though I fell off of that in my teenage years, I reverted back to what I was raised on, which is oftentimes what we do. And, seeing the representation that my father did, which was that he was always there for my mother and he was always there for us outside of any, he had his own psychological issues that he struggled with, which is oftentimes why people get into psychology. And, but still, he did his absolute best to maintain that. So I saw that demonstrated, and I saw it demonstrated during my formative years, right? Becoming a young man, which was very important, being able to model a 65-year-old, 70-year-old man is something that I think we miss a lot in our current culture. We're too much around others that are our peers instead of our superiors, right? And so therefore, it's the lost following the lost. And there's this beautiful story I remember hearing that Earl Nightingale tells. You ever hear of Earl Nightingale?
I think I've heard it before.
Okay, so he's one of the old school, kind of motivational speaker guys. Yeah. And from like the 50s, radio show personality. And he tells a story about the shopkeeper, right? So there's a shopkeeper in the small town, way back in the day, let's say like the 1930s. And he has this big clock he keeps in the window of his shop. And he listens for the quitting bell whistle at 5 o'clock every day to make sure that his clock is on time, right? And so if it's slightly off and he hears that whistle, he knows, okay, let me, move it a couple, notches over, make sure it's on time. So then one morning, or he notices rather, that there's this guy that stops by the clock every morning. And so one morning he's out there cleaning the window, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, you mind if I ask? I notice you stop here about every morning. What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, well, I blow the quitting whistle at the factory down the road, and I want to make sure that I adjust my watch to make sure it's on time." So you see, they're both following each other, and they both could have been off by, hours, and but that's how we are with our life. Is we'll come into a scene, whether it's as a coach, as a business owner, or as an employee, or as a father, family member, and we'll start mimicking and following people that don't know any better than we do. And so it's always very important to reevaluate, and again to make sure that you aren't just following someone who's just following someone else that has no idea where they're going. But again, that's the challenge that we have, and that's why I think it's a real detriment to our current society over the past few hundred years. Really, I guess ever since formal schooling, obviously there's been great benefits, right? Literacy rate and things like that. Of course, so much. But the downside is you have these kids that just hang around a bunch of other kids their age, and they're all idiots, right? And they have no perspective. And then in contrast to that too, they don't learn how to actually mentor anyone younger than them too. Versus, throughout the vast expanse of human evolution and development, we've had that experience as a unit, as a family, to learn from someone older than us, to start that mentorship younger versus waiting until we get out of college. And then also that experience of helping people that are lower than us and helping us be the example and taking care of them, learning to do that. And obviously people do have those experiences in our modern society, but I don't think enough. And so that's where I think I benefited greatly.
I could not agree more. I think it's pivotal to get people who are above you, and above you, usually they're older,
Right.
or just because they have more experiences, and helping out people that are younger than you. The other really important thing is like with Edwards Consulting, I have 5 pillars. It's mental health, physical health, community service, philanthropy, spirituality, and relationships. And when I talk to people, we talk about mentors. It's This was a huge distinction for me that I think is just massive. When you pick a mentor, they might be a business mentor. That's great. That does not mean that they're always a relationship mentor. They might have been divorced 3 or 4 times. And realizing that realization that, hey, you help me in this subject, you don't help me in
That's
this
right.
subject, is very important, because as we grow up, we find this a lot with our parentals, that they're always right. They're always right. I see it. I'm 27. I see it all the time with friends of mine. They go, I gotta talk to my parents. And I'm like, about what? And they're like, how do I do this? And I'm like, do your parents know how to do that better than you? And they're like, I don't know, but I have to go to that. And it's like, no, you have to make your own decision. Like, if
Yeah.
you need help, if they know something, sure,
Right.
like, go for it. Like, then they are a useful attribute. If they don't know something, they're not useful in that regard. And everyone has a place to fit. But to place someone that has that much control over your decision making is incorrect.
Right.
That is incorrect, because that's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you, because it puts a strain on the relationship. That's like, oh, well, they told me to do it, and okay, what's the market going to say to that? Like,
Right. No, exactly.
just
And off that note, that's where, I had to find those mentors on the business aspect, because my father, ran a very successful practice, but it was a sole proprietorship, and
yeah,
and it was, he had these stories, and I'm sure I have stories that I'm maybe not aware of that are self-limiting perhaps, but there'd be these stories that, as we know with our parents, right, we're very good at identifying the holes. But the story of the golden handcuffs, right? So I remember he would always tell me about one time he went on vacation for a couple of weeks or something like that. And he literally lost half of his practice because it was all based off of him. And I remember when as part of he and I's falling out towards the end, it was kind of like the prodigal son situation, but I guess and that didn't result perhaps in the same way. But that struggle between the father and son. But I remember, as I got more confident with business, saying like, well, why couldn't you have scaled it? Why couldn't you have this? And he had a lot of stories for why he couldn't. And then I'd ask him the very profound question that we should all ask ourselves when we're struggling, when we say we want something, is that, well, has anyone else done it? Right? Has anyone else done it maybe with less than you have? Right? And if there is anyone else that's done it, right, that's succeeded more than you have with less than you have, or just as much as you do, then what you're saying is an excuse, and you have to identify what your blind spots are and move forward. And that
I
was, well, yeah.
I just want to hop in. Sorry, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but that
You're good.
accountability of, has anyone done this before, is so massive. Because there's times where I sit there and I go, dude, this is impossible. like I've heard no 40 times today. Why am I still going? And then you're like, wait, you're telling me that one guy's done this? Like, that one guy who has nothing has done this? How
Right.
did he do that? Like, what is he doing? What is
Right.
that? And it's just realizing that, dude, anything's possible. You can go after whatever you want. You just have to go after it. And most people are too preoccupied to even go after it,
Right.
with their friends, going out, watching TV, doing whatever. You gotta go
Yeah,
after it.
that's right. And you have to pay a price, right? And it's almost cliche, but it's like you pay the price of, the reward, or the price of the penalty of not doing it, and the depression or the feeling of loss that you can experience from that. And it was something, again, to kind of go back to Brian Tracy, great author and motivational speaker, but is that it was something that changed my life, because, again, coming from someone that I just have a GED. And when I went to school as an elementary kid, I went to a hippie school. So I just did art a bunch, and I didn't learn how to multiply by the time I was in the 5th grade at all. And I knew nothing of it. And so I have very little education besides, like self-education, education from my father and mother. But what he said is that everything is learnable. And man, when I heard that back in about 2015 and 16, when I'm really at this like kind of make or break point with a business, everything is learnable. Nobody's better than you. Nobody's smarter than you. Everything is learnable. They're just doing things differently than you are. And it really helped change my perspective because here I am, in a college town, Athens, Georgia, UGA, University of Georgia. And I'm looking up to all these college kids, which are younger than me. And because they're in college, because they have a degree. And, I know it automatically sounds like I'm just like crapping on people with a degree. It is what it is. It's great. It can be an advantage, but it can also just be nothing. So, and it can also be a disadvantage too. I've seen it play out all three ways.
I think that you yourself have built up such a story that I'm coming out of this and this is not going to affect me at all.
Right.
But that's where it's because that's your viewpoint, and that's not a good or bad thing, but it helps you. The fact that you think that way helps you produce things, outlandish results that most people don't produce. Most people don't have multiple boxing gyms. Most people are not franchising. Most people aren't business owners. Most people aren't out here doing it on a Thursday night at 9:15. Most people aren't doing it. And that is what's the difference. So just because you speak that way doesn't mean that's actually how you feel, but to yourself, you have to come out that way because otherwise I'm just not going to be who I am. If someone's offended by that, that's fine. That's good. And we should talk. Because you have to understand that everyone has a different perspective. And if their perspective offends you, that's okay.
That's right.
It's better not. It's better off not doing it. It's fine.
But, that's one thing about kind of steering back to the family thing, though, is that it was something that embracing that role, as a father, right? And that's helped me as a business owner. It's helped me as a leader. It's helped me in all ways, shape, and form. And that's where business prepared me or helped grow me, I think, in abilities of fatherhood and everything else. But, there's a lot of research studies that show and support the value of, for instance, men and women both, truly. But, just talking about, what I know the most about, which is a man, which is myself, but is just the inherent value of having a child, right? Men that have a child in the house are more likely to be employed, right? Men that are married are more likely to be employed. And I think we can all agree, everyone listening, that if someone is employed, they are probably adding more, or rather employed or own a business, they are adding more to a society than someone that isn't, right? And again, taking away people that have disabilities, taking away people that, for a moment in time are not that. But on the average, it's not about what you take from people. It's about what you give to people. And, nothing more beautiful you can give, I think, than giving a service and value to people, but then also giving that same service and value to your wife and to your child or children. And something with marriage, though, that has been really powerful for both my wife and I, because we've changed very much as people. She went from being a competitive athlete to having nothing to do with it now, and being getting back into her roots, which is music. And then with myself, I went from being like this certain type of attitude to now this other type of attitude. Is that growing with people, right? You want to find someone that challenges you, man. And some people don't want to put up with that. And it's hard, man. It's hard when your wife calls you out, and it's hard when your husband calls you out, or when your significant other calls you out in a loving way. But it's because they believe in you. Right now, if they're calling you out to put you down, that's different. But you have to identify it. And if you don't have a partner that calls you out on your crap and tells you when you're screwing around and doing wrong, they're not a good partner, man. You don't want the person that is like lulling you to sleep and telling you like, oh, you don't need to try to tread water so hard. You can just float. Maybe you can just let that head drop underwater. Maybe you just go underwater a little longer, right? You're going to end up drowning. So having those people that are going to be straight up with you. So having people that are going to be honest with you, tell you the damn truth, and also that believe in you and your abilities.
100%. And the other thing is to realize that if you're a business owner, you might be there physically, but your family's still there in some other way,
right?
Because you're not there. And so that's that realization that like Keith comes on, I'm like, oh, what time do we have? Like, do we got enough time? Do we have this? And he's like, well, my wife's training for another 2 hours on the violin. I'm like, at 10 o'clock, like that's, you know what I mean? That discipline makes you want to go, okay, I'm going to bring it a little more. Like,
Right.
I'm going to bring the energy a little bit more because it's like, it's not like a competition, but it's like, yo, she's working. Why can't, like, the violin's harder than a conversation.
Right.
Like,
That's right. Well, and to that point is I had a beautiful talk with somebody. I won't say more about who it is, but it wasn't my wife. It was somebody else. And someone that I'm in a little bit of a mentor position with. And they're real young. They're 20, early 20s. And I think, well, rather, I would guess to say that I know they took this the right way, maybe with perspective. But I asked them, who's the most successful person around you in your peer group and your people that you hang out with, right? Not me, who's 35 years old. So automatically by default, I should be more successful than you are, hopefully. But, who in your peer group is more successful than you? And they're like, nobody, and they kind of said it a little bit, with a little bit too much confidence. Like, I don't know, like not being like, oh my God, there isn't anyone more successful than me. What am I doing? Right. And so I hope I was able to call them out on the blind spot, but it's such a horrible thing is that, man, if you are not around people or challenge yourself to be around people that make you feel like less, right? Make you feel less than what your mom told you were, whatever. Right. And yeah, it's so important. If you're around someone that's, drinking all the time or, just not taking care of themselves or frankly, just has a horrible attitude, it's going to rub off on you. And again, not that you can't help someone be better, right? If they're hopefully your superior in some other way, but being able to identify that is super important. And that's something as well. It's like, with every foundation, like I know that you're on that journey of, getting married, getting a family and everything. And, making sure you find the right person, just like the right business partner, but not only find the right person, but make yourself the right person, right? Because we forget about our role in a relationship. And it's been so powerful, because I'll talk to people about their fitness and health and things like that, not just about boxing. And it just for people to understand that, hey, man, you don't need to nag them about it necessarily. But if you start to change, they will inevitably have to change to some degree. It will affect them in some way. And it might affect them in the way of they're like, I don't like this person anymore. I don't love this person anymore. I don't want to be around this person anymore. But if you're actually changing in a way that is positive, that's actually growing you, then that's okay. That's fine. But when you're in a relationship and in a situation and in a business where you embrace and both agree that progress is happiness, that growth is the goal, right? And have your ideals aligned, or rather your ethics really, then the sky's the limit as long as you both stay on that path. So I know there's been plenty of times, like my wife would say that, she felt like I was leaving her behind in a sense, because I was on, at that time, a hardcore growth trend. And man, when she first met me, I was not on that and she was kind of on it. And so I kind of felt left behind a couple of times. And so to be with someone that challenges you, that makes you feel like, man, if I don't up it, I feel like they're going to leave me behind, not because they're not going to love me anymore, but just because of your own freaking self-concept, your own value in yourself.
I mean, you brought up a lot of major points. I love that your progress equals happiness.
Right.
Because too many of us rely on like, hey, I got the promotion, now I'm happy, or I'll be happy when. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The little bit of progress makes it a huge difference. And I think if you can find a win each day, it's much more powerful. And the other thing that you were talking about is inside of any relationship, if you're upset with the actions of someone, take accountability. What do you mean, Jordan? You're telling me someone was screaming at you? You have to take accountability? Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. Maybe you asked a stupid question. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you just rambled about yourself. Maybe you weren't talking about them. But having that awareness to go, hey, how was your day? How are you doing? What's happening?
And better yet, just to play off that, just interrupt real quick, is it might not be in that moment you screwed up, but maybe you've been screwing up all week. Maybe you've been screwing up all month or all year, right? So yeah, you could say, oh, dude, I was totally sweet that time and they totally blew up in my face. But yeah, what were you doing before that? Right?
Yeah, and it's the consistent action of, the way I like to view it is deposits. You want to make everyone thinks about it in a negative sense, but like, dude, building deposits with people, doing little things to be like, yo, here's a little bit more, here's a little bit more, here's a little bit more. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, a compliment's a deposit. A conversation, a walk with someone's a deposit. Listening, hearing them out is a deposit. A meeting with someone is a deposit.
Right.
Anything that you're doing is a deposit. And when you deposit it so many times, after enough rapport, it's like they're going to sit there and go, Jordan, what do you need?
Right.
How can I help? What is it that I can do? And that's in relationships too. Because if you're just providing so much instead of like provide, take, it's like, no, it's got to be give, and then maybe an ask.
That's
Not
right.
a take.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and it just changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah,
And
very
it's huge.
powerful.
But Keith, you're incredible, man. Your stories from the art to the philosophy to the boxing to this to that, I just think it's so profound, and people need to go after it. So we're gonna wind it down, but what's going on with Keppner Boxing? What are you guys doing? How's it growing? How's that? Because I know we got to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we started our business in 2013, and then we had our daughter about 6 years ago. That was the catalyst for my wife to step out of the business, the day-to-day operations, and then really the starting of me do it as well. And so then we, basically fully stepped out of the business, and it was still running and growing. And so I was like, okay, well, what's the next step? And again, going back to that progress is happiness thing, it's like, well, it's kind of like a lost 6 months where it's like, what the hell are we going to do? So we kind of started looking at different ways to keep doing what we're doing. And at the time I started kind of coaching some other business owners and things like that. And I really love the double B, right? Boxing and business, man. Just something about those two things together I love. And, so it's like, well, what's the kind of the next step? And it's like, do we want to just do pure corporate location expansion? Still something where, you can do in adjacent with franchising. But the franchise model is a really great model where it's coaching baked into it. And it gives, it's our baby, right? And so we want to, it's enough training wheels on the business and on the brand and things like that, you have a lot of power to help people do things the way that is ethical and is the way that you want the brand represented, which was our biggest fear. Because with boxing, there's a lot of great aspects to it, but there's some obvious downsides to that type of business. And as far as just how it treats people and whatnot, and its perception. So it kind of gave us the perfect avenue to go forth with. And we ended up hooking up with a fabulous company to develop the franchise and for a very, very nominal fee and with great support and everything else. And so then we started offering franchises August of 2020. So we started the process before the pandemic hit, and then stayed to our guns through the worst parts of the pandemic, and then started offering in August of 2020. So, which is funny about that because, imagine me talking to people about a boxing gym franchise, and like most people aren't even allowed to go to a gym, and it's such a dependent model on other people and you being with other people, like not like 10 feet away from other people, like with other people. Like, you did your Muay Thai class, you told me about, you were with your buddy, right? So imagine like, how people were viewing that type of thing. Like, dude, no, like in-person fitness, that's done for. That's never going to be back. And so it was a great experience to start off like that. Because then when that kind of faded away, then it was like, oh gosh, like everyone doesn't think this is just the most ridiculous idea in the world to do in-person fitness.
Which is a confidence boost to you, because you probably heard no so many times, and you're like, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path? Am I doing the right stuff?
Oh yeah.
No. When you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. Whether the market sees it or not, they will eventually see it.
Right. And the idea too is that whenever you expand into a larger realm of business, because like owning one business is one thing, owning a couple locations is another thing, and then going to like a franchise, which is, has the potential to be a very big business, you have to start expanding your time horizons out greatly, right? You can't be like, dude, I want to do 20 in, a year or whatever, 20 franchise partners. Well, I mean, if you got like all the things to scale that, but it's not probably going to be like that. And so just really expanding out that time horizon, again, similar to what you alluded to earlier, is just going along that journey and, knowing that, things aren't going to be perfect, but you're going to learn along the way, and you're going to bring in people that are going to, that have experience, that can help you succeed. Just like if you're a fighter or anything else like that, you bring in a coach that has experience. And so we've been really fortunate to have individuals on our franchise team that have worked with brands with over 600 units and things like that. So they've literally done this 600 times. And so that value for an emerging franchise is just so powerful because, I mean, gosh, that amount of repetition is just remarkable.
Yeah, it's the reps. It's all the reps.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Keith, where can people find you?
Yeah.
Where can they hear more about Keppner Boxing and everything?
Right. So great place to go is our website, keppnerboxing.com. And if someone wants to look at what the franchise aspect of the business is, they can go there, click on franchising, also just kind of read about us and whatnot. We also have a good little YouTube channel with about maybe 4,000 subscribers, and there's a lot of good boxing content on there. And then as you and I were talking about earlier, I got a good little social media presence on Instagram and whatnot, and it's good stuff. It's not all business oriented. Sometimes it's with the motivational aspect. I did radio for about 4 years, where every day Jordan, I was doing a motivational 45 seconds thing on it, and then a 30-minute show every Saturday. And so it's something that very passionate about, and it's something that I believe is our duty as husbands and wives, as business owners, as leaders, as fathers and mothers, to make sure that we continue to grow ourselves, similar to your tenets, in all the ways philosophically, and that also goes into the spiritual realm as well.
Absolutely. Keith, I appreciate what you're doing in the world, and we need more of Keith. We need to be sharing Keith, and we got to hear about what Keppner Boxing can be doing, because the thing is that the values behind Keith, I think, are some of the most impressive stuff that I've seen, just because most people are you can get deep with people, but Keith is like instant. This man's just dropping knowledge. So I appreciate it. This has been awesome. I'm going to drop all the information in the show notes, and I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there, and have a great day, and keep clocking in.